Hello, my name's Hilary Cass. I'm Honorary Neurodisability Consultant at Evelina London Children's Hospital, and I ran a clinic for children with Rett Syndrome for more years than I would like to admit to this camera. I'm actually here at the McKeith Press offices to talk to you about this book, which has recently been published and which I have very much enjoyed reviewing. So, I'm here with Andy in the office, who's going to kick us off on some questions.
So firstly, can you tell us what is Rett Syndrome?
Well, Rett Syndrome is a fairly rare condition. It affects 1 in 10,000 girls and in fact very few boys, and it impacts every area of neurological development. So motor development, cognition and communication. It also impacts the autonomic nervous system, so a lot of autonomic problems, gut problems, scoliosis, so that ultimately many different specialists are involved in the best symptomatic management of these girls.
And what are the prospects for treatment?
Okay, so this is a very hot topic at the moment. A researcher called Professor Adrian Bird, who developed a knockout model for Rett syndrome in mice, then reversed the condition, and this caused massive furore across the Rett community, because adult mice who had been very disabled were then seen scampering around the cage. The impact on families across the world was enormous because of the expectation that cure would be around the corner, and large amounts of money have been poured into curative research. Of course, one has to balance hope with reality here, and we are actually a very, very long way from experiments in or even trials from experiments in animals to trials in humans, and one of the downsides of that is that people are contributing less to research that is just about therapeutic management of the girls. The other interesting thing about the gene that causes Rett syndrome is that the protein has to be delivered in a precise dose effect. So it's called the Goldilocks principle. Too much or too little can have equally catastrophic effects, and so that means that actually replacing the protein is really much more difficult than people might assume on the surface.
And who do you think will find this book useful?
So the interesting thing about Rett syndrome is originally, because it was such a relatively rare disorder, one might have thought that few people would be interested. There are a couple of things to say about that. First of all, every community paediatrician and paediatric neurologist will have a number of these girls on their books. But more importantly, it's interesting for another reason, and that's that MECP2, the gene which is affected in the condition, turns out to code a protein which is a master regulator for brain development. So it impacts on the expression of a whole host of other genes. And that becomes very interesting in how normal brain development takes place, not just how disordered development takes place in this condition. So in one of the chapters, it's the MECP2 proteins described as rather a Rosetta Stone for understanding the rest of brain development, which gives this quite a broad applicability for anyone interested in the host of features that are affected in the condition.
Now, how can the book be applied to clinical practice?
Well, so there are. That's the other joy of this book. There are two aspects to it. One, some very clinically focused chapters which do describe current practice in management of various aspects, whether it be sleep problems, scoliosis, feeding problems, and so on. So it's very practical in that sense, as well as exploring the basic science.
And what did you particularly like or dislike about the book?
Okay, well, as I said, I think the things I liked are just that unusual dual niche of having clinical applicability but also interesting basic science implications. I think the downsides of it are that, as with any book that looks at aspects of neurodisability, the research, the evidence base can be weak on clinical application, and some of the statements are less evidence-based than others, and I think there could have been a somewhat more rigorous approach to some clinical aspects. But I think one has to apply critical appraisal to that as you read the book. And the other challenge always of a multi-contributor book is that there's some repetition between chapters, but I think those are relatively small criticisms given the value of the book overall. So my review of this book will be available in the June edition of DevMed, and I hope people get a chance to read it and indeed to enjoy the book. Thank you.